What is the most pressing thing on your mind?
Well, the election. I think, to be fair, we know that we're at such an important moment in the climate change fight and our net zero journey. And there's a lot of debate over whether it's worth doing net zero. You hear it in the press all the time. And I think there is a moment here where if people get into power and make bad decisions, we're going to struggle. We're going to really struggle to tackle climate change, and we're going to be staring down the barrel of the worst effects of it.
We really should have been at net zero 2016.
Of course, yeah, that was the plan, wasn't it? We were going to have buildings that were constructed under those building regulations that never happened, and it was dismantled overnight, wasn't it? And now we are at a stage where we're building buildings that will still need some intervention, some form of renewable heating system, probably some more insulation or draft proofing or something, because they're still relatively leaky. And the current building regulations, the interim one, have only really come into force in the last year, and I don't know how many buildings are actually being built to them, because it's about when they were designed. And then we've got another set of building regulations coming along, which we suspect we know what the answer will be, but we're not 100% sure because we haven't had the response to the consultation, and that's not going to happen until after the election as well. And I suppose, coming back to your original question, that's the problem at the moment. All the energy and, to coin a phrase, all of the activity within government stops when an election is called. And so we're now waiting on the outcome of about 4 or 5 different consultations that all have huge impact in our industry. And we're not sure what that will be, whether the new government comes in and goes, these were great ideas, everybody, we'd like to do this, or whether they'll say, yeah, we're not so sure, we want to go back to the drawing board and start again. I think the building regulations are more set in stone, because that's just the way things are. But we don't know which direction they're going to go. And if they go option A or option 1, we're actually going to be building buildings that are, you could argue, are worse than the current interim building regulations.
In what way?
They will require more energy. But we've got to have strong leaders and leaders that are brave enough to make difficult decisions, and very long-term decisions. They will never see that credit or that payback, because they'll be gone, they won't be in power, they might not even be around when those things start to bear fruit.
Yeah. That was one of the things I mentioned in a recent LinkedIn post that I did around the basis of a democratic society means that you need to have leaders in for a short space of time. But those leaders generally are only elected because the people like what they're hearing and what they're saying.
Yeah.
And the people generally look for things that are short term because they want to feel it now.
Yeah.
So there we've got the conundrum.
And then on the other side of it, you've got sort of dictatorships and long-term governments that have the ability to have that very, very long-termistic view, because they know they're never going to relinquish that power, and that's not great. So what you have to have is enough people who are happy enough to work in the middle ground, in between the divisions, to make sure things happen, stay on track. We can't keep making a step forward and then a step back, or even 2 steps back. We actually now need to be moving forward at pace if we're going to make a dent in this.
Do you think we have moved forward? So since you came into the industry, if I take that as a timeline.
Yeah, I think we have.
Which was when? 2007?
Yeah, we've made progress. Of course we have. We are able to measure the performance of our buildings, number one. We've done 25 million of those. I get told every day that there are problems with the EPCs that have been lodged in the data. And of course there are, because human beings are human beings, and there are lots of other reasons why you might have bad data in there. But actually, in any data set, you've got nonsense. You've got poor data. You have to do the same things with it. You do sensible analysis of that data and start to use it in smart ways, augment it with other bits of data. We've got some really good stuff there. The envy of a lot of other European countries, certainly looking across over at Canada and the like over there, they're looking over at us going, wow, you guys got on this really quick. We've also got to improve the way we measure. There are many ways of measuring. We have thrown an awful lot of effort behind an asset rating, which is what an EPC is. So you can compare it with one asset with another and another without skewing things off in directions that make it impossible to compare. And we've used assumed values and calculated results, and that's perfectly reasonable. We're now moving into a world where you can measure those results on site. They're not perfect at this moment in time. That technology is relatively new. It's not earth-shattering. Effectively you're creating an environment within a building, a relatively controlled environment. You know how much energy it's taken to create that environment, and then you measure how quickly that energy moves out of that envelope, out of that building. So that's where we're moving to. You still need the asset rating, you still need the calculations, you still need the assumptions, but then you can plug in some of these measured performance values and get a much clearer picture of how the building is working. We've been doing it for years, by the way. We've been doing air test results on buildings, and then plugging that into SAP and soon RD SAP. So that's the same sort of principle, but more specific, but the same.
So let's break that down a little bit. You've used a few acronyms that some people may not be aware of. SAP, SAP being one of them, and other phrases as well about asset ratings. Can you just break that down? What's an asset rating? What is energy performance of a building? The difference between the two.
Yeah.
And what's a SAP?
Okay, well, let's start with SAP, which is the Standard Assessment Procedure. It's a bit of a catch-all phrase, but essentially it's the way that we assess and model our buildings, our domestic buildings. So SAP is quite a complicated methodology, and effectively, without going into oodles of detail, you follow that methodology, you use the calculation as is written, and you will get a rating for a building, an asset rating. These things appear on something called an energy performance certificate or an EPC. That's an outcome. That's a report.
What other things would come out of that?
So you've got your energy rating, your energy efficiency rating. That's, I suppose, what everybody refers to, and that's what I refer to as the asset rating. That tells you where your building, your asset is at that moment in time.
So it grades it.
Grades it, yeah, on an A to G scale.
Yeah.
You've got your A-rated properties at the top end and your G-rated properties at the bottom end. And the things that make the difference are how good are the walls, how good's the floor, the roof, the heating system, etc., etc. And then you've got a potential rating, which is the sum of all the things you could do to that building within reason, from I suppose a menu or a list of recommendations, and that's as high as you could probably get it without spending an absolute fortune on things that probably won't make a huge difference. And again, that takes it up ideally up the scale up towards the A's and B's. Some buildings can get to an A and B, some can't. Some struggle to get beyond a C. In fact, there are buildings out there that don't even make that standard, and that's fine because these buildings weren't designed with energy efficiency in mind. Many buildings weren't. It's not until the last sort of 20, 30 years did we start thinking about how, as well as making buildings sound and solid and safe and accessible and deal with water and all the other things, did we start really thinking about the energy efficiency.
So you're talking of buildings that were built in the 16, 17, 1800s, listed buildings. Chances of you getting an A-rated listed building, quite slim. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but I mean, again, every building's different, which is why we have this assessment procedure that deals with as many different buildings as possible. Put everything to one side. The long-term goal is to make sure that when we have done everything that we need to do, we are not polluting the atmosphere because of our actions. That's where we want to get to. In the here and now, we've got 8 million people who are either in fuel poverty or transition, or they're transient people in fuel poverty. 1 minute, 1 month they're in, next month they're out, depending on the circumstances. And that's getting worse and worse. Now the fuel prices have gone up, hit record levels, and they're coming down, but they'll never get back to where they were. And I think the general trend is an upward trajectory. We know that fuel poverty is getting worse, and we need to do something about that. So that's the immediate concern. And actually that's what the EPC was designed for and what it still reports on. So our asset rating is a metric that that is influenced by fuel prices. And the problem with electricity, we all accept that electricity is probably the way of decarbonising. And I think any government that comes in will have to deal with that problem at the moment, that electricity is 3.5 times more expensive than gas. We need to sort of wean ourselves off this cheap fuel that we've relied upon for 50 years that was always accepted as being quite clean compared to electricity. Electricity was, we used to burn coal by the billions of tons or whatever in this country, and therefore electricity was considered dirty. It's flipped round now, and at some point in the 2030s it will be 100% green. By and large, we may have to turn on the odd gas turbine every now and again, but by and large it will be 100% green. So the way to decarbonise is just to put everybody on electric heating, but it's more expensive. So those 8 million or so people that are in or close to fuel poverty will suddenly be joined by an awful lot of other people who suddenly have to pay 3 times more for their heating or not turn it on. So what do you do about that? Well, you do something called energy efficiency, and you reduce their energy demand so that when they do need to put the heat on, they don't need it on for as long, and it stays in the building for longer. It's simple maths, simple physics. And really we shouldn't lose sight of that, because the other side of the equation is we're going to be decarbonising our transportation systems. We're going to be moving away from diesel and gasoline powered cars to electrically powered or hydrogen powered vehicles. But if you take anything off the road that was powered by gas and you replace it with electricity, you need to generate more electricity. So we're going to have this sort of power need. So we need to reduce our energy demand. And anybody who thinks there's no other, it doesn't matter, just generate more electricity, they're going about it the wrong way. Cheapest unit of energy is the unit you don't use.
And so that's one of the things that I've not seen spoken about at all, really, is the demand. No one's really having the demand debate or demand. And I've seen demand rocket, like skyrocket, massively, especially for electricity. And it will go up even more, surely, when we have electric vehicles that are more common than what they are now. But think about, if you've got children in your home, they will have the TV, they will have the computer, they'll have the phone, they'll have some form of tablet, maybe a games console as well. That's a lot more demand than what it was when I was young.
It's an insatiable desire for more and more technology. More and more technology is going to use power. The likelihood is that we are going to see shifts in energy usage. So we're not, whether the question is it a 1-for-1 shift? Does 1 unit of fuel over here equal 1 unit of electricity over here? That's hard to say, because when you do shift things like the usage of vehicles, people may alter the way that they work, the way they use them. So, for example, I know that I could get in my car. I've got a diesel-powered car, and it will do 700 miles on a tank. I don't have to worry about filling it up. If I am presented with a scenario where I can only go 250 miles in any one particular direction, and then as soon as I plug it in anywhere other than home, it's going to cost me pretty much the same as it would cost me at the pump to put fuel in my vehicle. I've got a bit of a decision to make, and I've moved to an electric vehicle for a number of reasons. I want to save the planet, I want to cut my bills, I want something that fits for me. So I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe do I need to make that trip? Do I move to an online meeting type? And I think we are making those decisions. So it is difficult to say whether by moving from this type of vehicle to this type of vehicle will just mean that we just shift the energy across. I would like to think that we can get to a situation where we do transition across and we reduce our energy demand. Over the last, and coming back to your original question, 2007, we have seen something in the region of about a 30% drop in energy usage in this country. And that's at a time when things are, there's more technology, as you say, more data centers.
So the demand has gone up, but the usage has gone down.
Yeah, it's pretty much where we're at. And most of that can be attributed to energy efficiency, reducing the amount of energy we need to do something by being more efficient at it. And future generations will look at us, our generation, probably the generation below us as well, and will judge us on our inability or our ability in this regard. So we've got to do it quickly, but we've also got to make sure that we don't plunge a load of people into fuel poverty or end up burning more and more of our precious resources, even if those resources come from a renewable source. It doesn't make sense to just waste it. Let's say we put heat pumps in every property. A heat pump should, if designed correctly and is fit for the house as it is, so it's got the right radiators and it's the right size and it's the right flow temperature, should be working at a coefficient of an efficiency level, should I say, just to keep it simple, of about 400%, maybe 450%. And certainly I've seen plenty of systems achieving that now. But it's for simple maths, let's say it's 4 times more efficient than the gas boiler. All of a sudden, this line up here, which is our heat demand, drops by 4 times. So it's down here, really close now. So what do? Well, let's build some new houses. Lots of new houses. Replace the old with the new. It brings it a bit closer. Still got a gap. Heck, what do? It's called energy efficiency. You make your buildings, your existing buildings, more efficient, and that drops it to that level.
So then in this area that we're talking, this conversation, you're just talking about regulated energy here.
Yes.
So regulated energy, I'll let you define it, and then you can go on and talk about unregulated energy. But I think that when it comes to this demand, the original point that I was making was more around unregulated energy as opposed to regulated energy.
Yeah, and regulated energy for me covers things like heating, hot water. Unregulated is, what kind of oven you've got, or whether you've gone for a big American fridge freezer or a smaller fridge freezer. It's the stuff you use every day. The reality is that is a small proportion of our energy demand. It's still significant, but it compared to heating and hot water and transportation, it is relatively small.
So just to clarify here, you're saying that the big demand is regulated energy. So that is the stuff which you don't plug in because it comes fixed with your house, as opposed to the unregulated energy, which is the stuff with a plug on it, your oven, your fridge.
Yeah, clearly, if you've got your oven on 24/7, that becomes a big draw of your power. If you've got a kiln or a swimming pool or something like that, and it's important to understand that. And everybody wants a big TV, but these units now, the power draw on them is, not to get too geeky or technical, but when they built the PlayStation 5, they built it with power in mind. What's the maximum performance we can get out of the minimum amount of power, which is the best way of designing something. Number one, it makes it mean that you can really understand the performance of your unit, and also you can build games to that standard. But you also you're not going to fry the innards by
it's going to last longer, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to last longer.
Good. So what is it? Sorry, just changing gears here really quick. What is it that your members are most concerned about?
I think there's probably about 3 or 4 things. Understanding what change is coming down the line. There's plenty of it.
So this is including the election and other things?
Yeah, I'd say so. The change sort of subject area is massive.
Yeah.
For them directly, it's things like the methodologies that they use. So we talked about SAP, Standard Assessment Procedure. There's something called RD-SAP, which is like the child version of it. It's a reduced data version, and we use that for assessing people's homes. It allows us to do an assessment on something that we can only see. We're not going to have all the data that belongs to that property, say in a file over here. And they're going to change markedly over the next sort of 2 or 3 years. Something called the home energy model is coming out, and we're starting to understand what it means. We don't have all the answers at the moment. It's one of the consultations that we're waiting on. But that's going to be fascinating to see come through. It's a big change. Every single assessor who does SAP or RD-SAP at some point will need to make the move to that new methodology. We will have to write new software, and we will have to bring everybody else who's a stakeholder in the industry along with it as well. And it will have impacts on any other regulation that's attached to things like EPCs or building regulations. But it is hugely, it's got a lot of potential. And I'll give you, for instance, we're talking just now about how we've got to build a better grid and have that grid suitable. But we don't know enough about the energy usage or the energy demand as will be in order to make some really smart decisions. We need the methodology, the home energy model, to help us here, because what it will do is, instead of calculating how much energy each property will need for each month of the year, so it does 12 calculations, the home energy model will do one. We're waiting on the result on this, but we suspect it'll do one every half an hour. So however many thousand calculations for each assessment. And what that will do is it will allow us to start to think about time of use tariffs. And if you've got solar panels on the roof, or you want solar panels on the roof, it'll be able to work out exactly how much energy those panels will deliver. If you want to put a battery in your property, you'll be able to start thinking about, and the government and whoever's looking at this data will be able to start looking at those batteries and going, well, we've got X number of terawatts of storage potential here, and we know the energy is going to spike here, and we know it's going to dive here. So we'll start building some smarter grid technology that allows us to draw on electricity from batteries up and down the land, or we know that people will be able to draw upon their own battery at certain times of peak. And what we'll do is that the cost will be high at that point, and then we'll make electricity cheaper at these times when there isn't so much demand, and people with batteries can put that energy into those batteries and recharge them, or they'll stop using their energy in the house and start charging up because it makes sense to, and just draw a bit off the grid. That smarter use of electricity will be a bit of a game changer, because we can balance the load of the grid. We won't have to build as many power stations. We won't have to turn on as many power stations. We'll know what we can beg and what we can borrow and what we can take, and then we'll know when we can give it back. And so that's why it's so important. It's also, there's loads of other technologies that will rely upon that. Heat pumps, for example, knowing when the demand is going to be and when the grid is going to be producing a certain amount, and when we'll be able to pull from storage. So that's so important. We'll need to be able to communicate that. That's on the minds of our assessors. The other things are the things that I think have always been on their mind. Like, our EPC is going to disappear overnight, or a new government comes in. Is someone going to just flick a switch and say, we're not going to do that anymore?
So can you see a future where someone can actually have a building where it's devalued because the energy performance is not that great? So they've almost got a toxic asset.
It's possible, yeah. It's definitely not a desire. You want to find this happy medium of regulatory drivers to ensure that people don't get caught with a toxic asset. Buildings are going to be worth money, but what will make them worth less is us being in a situation where climate change is having its worst effects. Because buildings will either be too hot to live in. Nobody wants to live in a building where they're boiling hot for a good proportion of the year. Equally, properties that live near watercourses or rivers, lakes, streams, when you've got a warming climate with lots more rain and lots more water on the land, they're going to get flooded more. And the more they get flooded, the less insurable they are. And if you can't insure a building, who's going to buy that building? So we need to avoid that situation. So it's about getting the balance right.
You've been in the industry for a long time, and I'm sure that you have heard lots of rumours go around. And so now I think if we just go into the demolition zone,
sure,
we can discuss about a myth or a fallacy, and you can help us clear it up.
Yeah.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Jack William George, this is for you. Pay attention.
So we have got this construction here that you've got. It's two towers at the side, high structure, a couple of arches. I don't know if it's a donkey, a horse, or a dog that you've got there at the front, but it was just in the bag, right? You didn't really have too much of a choice, but you've decided to use it. And a stop sign.
I've used the two unique bricks that you...
What myth does this represent?
I was racking my brains thinking of something sort of really specific and earth-shatteringly new. But the reality is there's still a lot of people out there that don't think climate change exists. You hear it in the politics of today that we can go on burning gas, oil, treating the planet in the way that we've treated it for the last 150 years, and expect it to be there whenever we need it. And sadly, I don't think we're ever going to change their minds. What I'd like to think is that is a generational thing, and it goes away over time. It certainly is, I suppose, more convenient to think that we can carry on being the way that we are, and that we can continue to abuse the planet. But I need it to stop. I want that myth to disappear really quickly as this building, this two-towered thing with arches, is going to get demolished. It isn't down to the volcanoes. Yes, volcanoes produce CO2 plus other things, but the science is there. The science is strong. You can't refute it. We're seeing it today, and in 10 years' time, we're going to be seeing a lot more of it. And I don't want to wait till 10 years' time to say, I told you so, because there won't be time for that. There'll be no virtue in being magnanimous at that point. So yeah, that's what I want to demolish today, is the incorrect opinion of certain politicians and other people of power and significance that can have influence on a lot of other people who believe that climate change has got nothing to do with man.
You are free to demolish this myth.
I didn't hit any of the technology either. So.
Which we're really grateful for. Andrew, it's been great having you on the show.
It's been
today.
Lovely being here, thank you.
And listening to your passion, your wisdom, it really has been great.